I stepped onto the driveway of the home I had purchased for my mother, only to find the locks changed and cameras tracking my movement. I rang the bell 4 times before pushing my way inside in the kitchen. My mother stood by the sink in a worn maid's uniform, averting her gaze as if she were afraid to be seen by the owner. The sickening realization hit me that on paper, she might no longer be the owner. My name is Nora Lawson. I am 35 years old, and for the last 5 years my reality has been the biting cold of the North Sea, the smell of ozone and the blinding blue arc of a welding torch. I spent 60 months living on industrial rigs off the coast of Norway, surrounded by rough men and dangerous machinery, doing a job that terrified most people. I did not do it for the thrill. I did not do it for the travel. I did it because poverty is a kind of violence, and I was willing to bruise my hands and burn my retinas to make sure my mother never had to feel that violence again. When the wheels of the plane touched down on the tarmac at Phoenix Sky Harbor, the pilot announced that the local time was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the temperature was 104 degrees. I looked out the window at the scorched earth and the sprawling grid of the city. I felt a tightening in my chest that had nothing to do with the landing and everything to do with the woman waiting for me. Lillian Lawson. My mother. The woman who had scrubbed floors and cleaned toilets for 20 years after my father died in a factory accident that the company called operator error, and we called criminal negligence. Dad died when I was 14 and my brother Trent was 8. I grew up fast. Trent just grew up wanting. That was the difference between us. I learned that safety costs money. Trent learned that money bought status. When I left for Norway 5 years ago, I had a single goal. I was going to work double shifts, take the hazard pay, and send every single cent back to Mesa, Arizona. I wanted to pay off the mortgage on the house. I wanted Mom to retire. I wanted her to sit in her garden and drink iced tea and never have to wring out a mop again. And I had done it. Or so I thought. I walked out of the terminal with a single duffel bag thrown over my shoulder. My luggage was light, but my bank account was heavy for the first time in my life. I had transferred the final payment for the house 6 months ago. I had the deed confirmation in my email. The house was hers, free and clear. I hailed a rideshare, and the blast of air conditioning in the car felt like a luxury I had almost forgotten. The driver was a chatty man in his 50s, but I gave him one-word answers until he got the hint and turned up the radio. I watched the landscape shift from the industrial gray of the airport to the beige stucco and red tile roofs of the suburbs Mesa. It was a place that felt like a heated blanket, stifling and comfortable all at once. We turned onto Rosemary Lane. My heart hammered against my ribs. I had not told them the exact day I was coming. I wanted to surprise her. I imagined the look on her face. I imagined her crying, wiping her hands on her apron, pulling me into a hug that smelled like lavender and fabric softener. I had played that scene in my head 1,000 times while I was suspended 50 feet above freezing black water, welding a structural support in a gale. That vision was what kept me warm. This is it. Right? The driver asked, pulling up to the curb. Yeah, I said, my voice thick. This is it. I tipped him $10 on the app and stepped out. The heat hit me instantly, dry and aggressive, sucking the moisture right out of my skin. The car drove away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk in front of the house I had saved. But as the dust settled, the smile that had been forming on my lips died. The house was the same structure, a modest single-story ranch with a 2-car garage, but it felt like a stranger was wearing its skin. The overgrown bougainvillea my mother loved, the chaotic explosion of pink and purple flowers she spent hours tending was gone. In its place were manicured, severe hedges cut into sharp geometric boxes. The lawn was not the soft, slightly patchy grass of a family home. It was artificial turf, gleaming with an unnatural green plastic shine under the Arizona sun. I walked up the driveway, the soles of my boots crunching on the concrete. Something was wrong. The hair on the back of my neck, trained by years of working in high-risk environments to sense danger before I saw it, stood up. I reached the front porch, the old welcome mat, The one with the faded sunflowers was missing. The porch was bare. Daryl. But it was the door itself that made me stop cold. When I left 5 years ago, the front door had a standard brass deadbolt. My mother kept a spare key hidden inside a fake rock near the planter. A system that was not secure, but was endlessly trusting. Now, the brass hardware was gone. In its place was a sleek black digital keypad with a touchscreen interface. It looked like something you would find on a secure server room, not a suburban home in Mesa. I looked up in the corner of the porch ceiling. A black dome camera stared down at me. The lens adjusted with a tiny audible worrying sound. It was tracking me. I stepped back and looked at the rest of the house. Another camera was mounted on the corner of the garage. A third one watched the side gate. This was not security. This was surveillance. I took a breath, trying to rationalize it. Maybe Trent had installed it for her safety. Maybe there had been break-ins in the neighborhood. My brother was always into gadgets, always trying to look more sophisticated than he was. Maybe he convinced her this was necessary. I reached out and pressed the doorbell. I expected the old familiar two-tone chime. Ding dong. Instead, there was silence. No sound came from inside the house. Pressed it again. Harder. Silence. I checked my watch. It was 2:45 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Mom should be home. She was retired now. I made sure of that. She should be watching her soap operas or napping. I knocked on the wood of the door. 3 sharp raps. Mom, it's Nora. Nothing. The silence was heavy, unnatural. It was not the silence of an empty house. It was the silence of a house that was holding its breath. I stepped off the porch and walked backward into the yard to look at the windows. The blinds were all drawn tight. Not the cheap plastic vertical blinds we used to have, but expensive heavy blackout shades. The house looked shut down, sealed tight against the world. Excuse me. I turned around across the street. Mrs. Higgins was checking her mail. She was a woman who used to bring us casserole whenever Mom was sick. A woman who knew everyone's business within a 3-mile radius. Mrs. Higgins, I waved, feeling a rush of relief to see a familiar face. I jogged halfway down the driveway. It's me. Nora Lawson. Mrs. Higgins looked up. Her eyes widened behind her thick glasses. For a second, I saw recognition. Then, immediately following it, I saw something else. Evasion. She did not smile. She did not wave back. She clutched her bundle of mail to her chest and looked down at the pavement. Mrs. Higgins, I asked, slowing down. I just got back from overseas. Is my mom home? The door is locked. I don't know, she said. Her voice low. Almost a whisper. She did not look at me. She looked at the house behind me, her eyes darting to the camera above the garage door. I haven't seen Lillian in a while. Is she okay? Asked, the alarm bells in my head getting louder. I have to go, Mrs. Higgins said abruptly. She turned and walked quickly back up her own driveway, her movement stiff and nervous. She went inside and closed her door firmly. I heard the lock click. I stood there in the street, sweat trickling down my spine. Mrs. Higgins had looked at my mother's house like it was a haunted place or a crime scene. I turned back to the house. The camera above the garage whirred again. It was definitely watching me. Anger began to mix with the fear. This was the house I paid for. That was my mother inside. I walked back to the front door. My steps heavy and deliberate. I did not knock this time. I pounded on the door with the side of my fist. Mom, open the door. It's Nora. I waited 10 seconds. 20 seconds. I was about to go around the back and break a window if I had to. I calculated the cost. I could fix a window. I could not fix the feeling that something terrible was happening on the other side of that wood. Then I heard it. The sound of locks disengaging. Not just one, but several. The electronic keypad beeped a cheerful melodic tone that clashed with the tension in the air. The door opened inward. I prepared myself to see Mom. I prepared myself to see her frail or confused or maybe just waking up from a nap. But it was not Mom. Standing in the doorway, blocking the view of the living room, was my brother Trent Lawson. He was 29 years old. But he looked different than the kid I remembered. He was wearing a polo shirt that looked like it cost $200 and linen trousers. His hair was styled with product, slicked back in a way that he probably thought made him look like a venture capitalist. For less than a second, maybe half a second, his face was naked. I saw it. I saw the panic. His eyes went wide, his jaw went slack, and the color drained out of his cheeks. It was the look of a child caught holding the match that started the fire. It was absolute primal terror. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, the mask slammed into place. A smile plastered itself onto his face. It was too wide, too bright. It did not reach his eyes. "Nora!" he shouted, his voice cracking slightly before he corrected it. "Oh my God. Nora, you're back." He stepped forward, spreading his arms wide, effectively blocking me from stepping inside. He hugged me. But the hug felt wrong. It was a barrier, not an embrace. His body was tense, rigid as a board. "Trent," I said, not hugging him back. I pulled away and looked him in the eye. "Where is Mom?" She's here," Trent stammered. He laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. "Man, you didn't tell us you were coming. We would have picked you up. We would have thrown a party." "I didn't want a party," I said, my voice cold. I looked over his shoulder. The living room was dark behind the blackout shades. I could see shapes of furniture, but it didn't look like our furniture. "Why are there cameras everywhere?" "Trent, why didn't anyone answer the door?" "Security." "Nora, you know how it is these days," Trent said, waving a hand dismissively. He was sweating. I could see beads of perspiration forming on his upper lip. "Just keeping Mom safe. That's all. Just keeping her safe." "Where is she?" I asked again. "She's in the kitchen," Trent said. He shifted his weight, trying to look casual. But his eyes kept darting to the street, then to the keypad, then back to me. "She's just relaxing. You know, Mom, always puttering around." He was lying. I knew my brother. I knew his tells. When he lied, he talked too much. When he lied, he tried to sell you a version of reality that was just slightly too polished. "Move," I said. "Nora. Wait. Let me just go tell her," I said. "Move." I pushed past him. He stumbled back, surprised by my strength. 5 years of hauling steel cables and welding underwater pipelines had made me solid in a way he would never be. I stepped into the foyer. The air inside was freezing cold. The air conditioning set to a temperature that would make a polar bear shiver. The smell hit me first. It didn't smell like lavender and fabric softener anymore. It smelled like expensive leather and lemon-scented cleaning chemicals. It smelled like a hotel lobby. I walked into the living room. My boots clattered on the floor. The old comfortable carpet was gone, replaced by hardwood that gleamed in the dim light. The recliner Dad had died in, the one Mom refused to throw away for 15 years, was gone. In its place was a massive L-shaped white leather sectional sofa that looked like it had never been sat on. A television the size of a movie screen dominated the far wall. "Nora. Seriously." "Wait," Trent said, chasing after me. "Beale is here. Too. You remember Belle." I didn't answer. I didn't care about Belle. I didn't care about the furniture. I walked straight toward the kitchen. The layout of the house was the same, but the soul of it had been gutted. "Mom," I called out. There was no answer. I reached the kitchen door. It was a swinging door. The kind with a small window at the top. Pushed it open. The kitchen was bright. The blinds here were open, letting the merciless afternoon sun flood the room. And there she was. But for a moment, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. I stood there, my hand frozen on the doorframe, trying to reconcile the image in front of me with the reality I thought I had paid for. The woman standing at the sink was small. She seemed to have shrunk in the last 5 years. Her gray hair, usually pulled back in a neat bun, was loose and stringy, but it was her clothes that made the breath catch in my throat. She was not wearing her comfortable house dress. She was not wearing the floral blouse she liked to wear for company. My mother was wearing a uniform. It was a gray scrubbing tunic similar to what hospital cleaners wear, stained with water and old grease. An oversized apron was tied around her waist. She was scrubbing a roasting pan, her hands moving with a frantic jerky rhythm. She did not turn around when the door opened. She hunched her shoulders as if expecting to be yelled at. "Mom," I whispered. She froze. The scrubbing stopped slowly, terrifyingly slowly. She turned her head. Her eyes met mine. There was no spark of recognition. Not at first. There was only fear. Pure. Unadulterated fear. She looked at me. Then her eyes darted past me to Trent, who was now standing behind me. She cringed. It wasn't the look of a mother seeing her daughter. It was the look of a servant caught breaking a rule. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice raspy and dry. "I'm almost done. I'm sorry." The world tilted on its axis. The heat of the Arizona sun vanished, replaced by a cold rage that started in the pit of my stomach and spread through my veins like ice water. I had sent $200,000 home. I had worked until my hands bled. I had missed birthdays, Christmases, and 5 years of her life so she could be a queen in her own castle. And I had come home to find her a servant in her own kitchen. The air inside the house was not just cool. It was antiseptic. It smelled of industrial lemon polish and the kind of expensive leathery scent you find in the lobby of a high-end boutique hotel. Not the home of a 70-year-old woman. Trent had his hand on my elbow. It was a firm guiding grip, the kind a bouncer uses right before he throws you out. Only Trent was using it to pull me further into the living room. He was trying to steer me away from the kitchen, away from the image of our mother in that gray uniform. He was moving with a frantic, nervous energy, his polished shoes squeaking slightly on the new hardwood floors. "Come on, Nora," he said, his voice pitching up an octave. "Sit down. You must be exhausted. That flight from Europe is a killer, right? Let's get you some water. Let's just catch up for a second before we overwhelm Mom." He practically shoved me toward the furniture. I stumbled slightly, my heavy work boots catching on the edge of a rug that shouldn't have been there. I regained my balance and looked around. Truly looked around. For the first time, the disorientation hit me like a physical blow. The living room I had paid for. The room I had visualized every night while trying to sleep in a bunk on a storm-tossed rig was gone. My mother's floral armchair, the one with the dip in the cushion where she had sat to read to us for 20 years, was missing. The oak coffee table with the water rings and the stack of Reader Digest magazines was missing. The wall of framed photos. My graduation. Trent's Little League team. Dad standing by his truck was wiped clean. In their place stood a showroom. A massive L-shaped sofa dominated the room. It was upholstered in cream-colored leather that looked so tight it might squeak if you breathed on it. Across from it hung a television screen that was at least 70 in wide, black and imposing like a monolith. The walls were painted a stark gallery white. There was a glass cabinet in the corner filled with crystal decanters and abstract sculptures that looked like twisted metal knots. It was cold. It was impersonal. It was a bachelor pad funded by my labor. Belt shouted toward the hallway, his voice tight. "Belle. Come out here." Guess who surprised us? He turned to me, his smile stretching so wide it looked painful. You remember Belle, right? We got married 2 years ago. We sent you the pictures. I remembered the pictures. They were digital files sent to my email. I had been in the middle of a 6-week welding rotation and had barely had the bandwidth to download them. A woman appeared from the hallway that led to the master bedroom. My mother's bedroom. Belle was 28 years old, though she was styled to look older and wealthier. She was wearing a beige cashmere lounge set that probably cost more than my first car. Her blonde hair was blown out straight and her makeup was flawless, the kind of no makeup look that takes an hour to achieve. She stopped when she saw me. Her eyes flicked to Trent, then to me, then back to Trent. It was a micro-interaction, a silent communication of panic that lasted less than a second. Nora, she said. Her voice was smooth, practiced. She walked forward with a stiff gliding motion. Oh my goodness. We didn't know you were coming today. She extended a hand, then awkwardly pulled it back and went for a tentative hug. She smelled of vanilla and fear. Her body was rigid against mine. Welcome home, she said, pulling away quickly. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. We were just talking about you the other day. Were you? I asked. My voice sounded loud in the empty echoing room, because nobody answered the door. We were in the back. Trent said quickly. Too quickly. We didn't hear it. The new insulation is amazing. Really soundproof. I looked at him. The camera saw me. Trent. I saw the lens move. Trent laughed. A dry cracking sound. Technology. Right? Sometimes the notifications are delayed. But hey, you're here now. That's what matters. Look at you. You look strong. He meant I looked rough. I knew what I looked like. I was wearing cargo pants, a flannel shirt, and boots that had seen the bottom of the North Sea. I had a scar running through my left eyebrow, and calluses on my hands that could sandwood. I was the reality check crashing into their fantasy. Where is she? I asked. I didn't want small talk. I saw her in the kitchen. Trent. Why is she wearing a uniform? Trent and Belle exchanged another look. This time, Belle took the lead. She stepped between me and the kitchen door, folding her arms across her chest in a posture that was defensive, but trying to look casual. Nora. Listen, Belle said, her voice dropping to a sympathetic conspiratorial whisper. A lot has changed since you've been gone. Mom she isn't the same. What do you mean? I felt a cold spike in my chest. Her mind. Trent chimed in, stepping up beside his wife. They formed a wall. She's confused. Nora. She gets these ideas. She forgets who she is. She forgets who we are. She likes to clean. Belle added, nodding earnestly. It's a soothing mechanism for her. The doctors call it repetitive task fixation. If we try to stop her, she gets agitated. She gets confused. So, we let her wear the apron. We let her potter around. It keeps her calm. So, you let her scrub the floor. Asked, my hands curling into fists at my sides. You let her serve you? We don't let her serve us, Trent said, looking offended. We take care of her. Why do you think we moved in? Do you have any idea how hard it is to care for someone with cognitive decline? We gave up our apartment. Nora. We moved in here to make sure she's safe 24 hours a day. I looked at them. Their clothes were crisp. Their skin was glowing with health. They didn't look like weary caregivers. They looked like parasites who had found a very comfortable host. My eyes drifted to the sideboard near the television. It was a sleek black lacquered unit. Sitting on top of it, jarring against the minimalist decor, was a plastic pill organizer and a large orange prescription bottle. But something was wrong with the bottle. I stepped around Trent, ignoring his hand reaching out to stop me. I walked over to the sideboard and picked up the bottle. The label had been peeled off. There was no patient name, no drug name, no dosage instructions, just raw sticky residue where the information should have been. Next to the bottle was a sheet of paper taped to the cabinet. It was a printed calendar for the month of November. Certain squares were crossed out with a thick red marker. But it wasn't a social calendar. It was a schedule. 08 Hazuro dose 14 Hazuro dose 20 Kuro bed. It looked like a prison rotation, not a care plan. What is this? I held up the unlabeled bottle. What are you giving her? Supplements. Belle said instantly. Herbal things for memory and a mild regulator for her moods. We took the label off because she gets fixated on reading the side effects. It upsets her. The doctor suggested it. Which doctor? I asked. Dear Arrington. Trent said he's a specialist. I've never heard of him. I said. Mom has seen Dr. My Evans for 20 years. Evans retired. Trent said he was sweating again. Look, Nora, you've been gone 5 years. You don't know the day-to-day. You just send the checks and think that solves everything. You don't know what it's like to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning because she's trying to leave the house. That's why the locks are changed, Belle said. Her voice taking on a scolding tone. The keypad isn't to keep people out. It's to keep her in for her safety. I stared at the red marker on the calendar. Bed at 2000 hours. 8 o'clock at night. A memory flashed in my mind. The video calls over the last 2 years. Every time I called, it was Trent who answered. He would hold the phone. Mom would be sitting in the background, usually on the sofa, looking tired, looking vague. She's having a bad day, Trent would say. She's just waking up, he would say. The connection is bad. Nora, we have to go. The calls never lasted more than 5 minutes. I had attributed it to the time difference. I had attributed it to her aging. I had trusted him. I had trusted my little brother to be the man I paid for him to be. I looked at the pill bottle in my hand. It didn't rattle like vitamins. It rattled like sedatives. She didn't look confused in the kitchen. Trent, I said quietly. She looked terrified. That's part of the condition, Belle said. She stepped closer, reaching for the bottle in my hand. Paranoia. Fear of familiar faces. It's textbook. She tried to take the bottle. I pulled my hand back. No, I said. I'll keep this. Belle's polite mask slipped. Her eyes narrowed into slits. Nora, don't come in here and disrupt her routine. We have a system. You're going to upset her. Clink. The sound came from behind the kitchen door. It was the soft, distinct sound of a ceramic plate touching a granite countertop. It was a careful sound. The sound of someone trying to be invisible. She's in there right now, I said. Alone. She's organizing the pantry, Trent said. She likes to organize. She was washing dishes. I corrected him. In a uniform. It's just an apron. Nora. Trent snapped. His patience fraying. Stop being so dramatic. You're acting like we're running a labor camp. We are family. Family doesn't peel the labels off medicine, I said. I turned toward the kitchen. Trent moved fast. He stepped directly in front of the swinging door, blocking my path with his body. He held up both hands, palms out, in a gesture that was meant to be calming, but felt like a threat. Nora, please, he said. Just wait. Let me go in and prepare her. If you just barge in there, she might have an episode. She might not recognize you. Could be traumatic for her. Just give me 5 minutes to get her settled. Prepare her for what? Asked. Taking a step closer. I was 3 and taller than him, and thanks to the rig, I was about 40 pounds of muscle heavier. Prepare her to act the way you want her to act. To put her face on. Belle shrilled from behind me. To fix her hair. Have some dignity for her. I didn't look at Belle. I kept my eyes locked on Trent. I saw the desperation in his gaze. He wasn't trying to protect our mother from trauma. He was trying to buy time. He was trying to figure out how to spin the narrative before I got access to the source. I don't need her to fix her hair, I said. Nora. I'm forbidding you, Trent said, puffing out his chest. As the person responsible for her care, I am telling you not to go in there right now. Responsible for her care. I repeated. I looked around the lavish, sterile room. Or responsible for her assets. Trent flinched as if I had slapped him. I didn't wait for his answer. I didn't wait for Belle's next lie. I reached out, grabbed Trent by the shoulder of his expensive linen shirt, and physically moved him to the side. He stumbled, his shoes slipping on the polished wood. Hey, he shouted. You can't just. I pushed the kitchen door open. The air inside was warmer than the living room. It smelled of dish soap and old grease. The figure at the sink had not moved. She was still hunched over, her hands submerged in the soapy water, her shoulders curved in a permanent posture of submission. She heard the door open. She didn't turn around. I'm hurrying. She whispered to the window. I'm hurrying. Sir. The word hung in the air. Sir. She wasn't talking to a son. She was talking to an employer. I stepped into the kitchen, letting the door swing shut behind me, cutting off Trent and Belle and their lies. I was in the kill zone now, and I wasn't leaving until I got the truth. The silence in the kitchen was absolute. A vacuum that sucked the air right out of my lungs. The afternoon sun was slicing through the window above the sink, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. But it did nothing to warm the woman standing there. My mother, Lillian Lawson, was standing with her back to me. Her posture was all wrong. She was hunched over the stainless steel basin, her shoulders drawn in tight toward her chest as if she were expecting a blow. She was scrubbing a large roasting pan, the metal scraping against metal with a harsh rhythmic rasping sound that set my teeth on edge. Mom, I said again, my voice trembling in a way I hated. She did not turn immediately. The scrubbing stopped, but her hands remained submerged in the soapy water. I took a step closer, my boots making a heavy thud on the tile. That sound seemed to jolt her. She turned slowly, wiping her wet hands on the front of her apron. It was not a decorative apron, the kind with ruffles or funny slogans she used to wear when baking cookies. It was a heavy industrial canvas apron stained dark with old grease and water spots, tied tightly over a gray tunic that was 2 sizes too big for her. She looked at me for 5 heartbeats. There was nothing. No spark. No joy. No recognition. She looked at me with a dull, glazed expression, her eyes scanning my face as if I were a stranger who had just wandered in from the street. It was the look you give to a salesperson or a repairman. Polite, distant, and wary. I finished the floors. Ma'am, she whispered, her voice cracking. I just have the pans left. My knees almost buckled. She thought I was the homeowner. She thought I was Belle. Mom, choked out, stepping into the light so she could see me clearly. It's me. It's Nora. She blinked, her brow furrowed. She leaned forward slightly, squinting. The confusion on her face began to clear, replaced by a slow, dawning realization. Her mouth open, her lips trembling as they formed my name. Nora, she breathed. Yes, Mom. I'm home. I took a step forward, reaching for her. But she did not reach back. Instead, her eyes darted instantly, violently over my shoulder. She looked at the swinging door behind me. She looked for Trent. She looked for Belle. It was a reflex. Sharp and terrified. Like a dog checking for its master before it dares to eat. You shouldn't be in here," she stammered, backing up until her hips hit the edge of the counter. She wrung her hands together, the red chapped skin rubbing raw. "They don't like it when there are people in the kitchen. It disturbs the flow." "Who doesn't like it?" asked, my voice hardening. "Mom!" Trent's voice boomed from behind me. The door swung open, hitting my shoulder as he pushed his way in. He moved with a speed I didn't think he possessed, placing himself physically between me and our mother. "Mom!" "Look who it is," Trent announced, his voice booming with a fake theatrical cheerfulness that made my stomach turn. He put an arm around her shoulders, squeezing her tight. Too tight. "It's Nora. She surprised us. Isn't that great?" He looked at me, his smile fixed and straining. "She was just confused for a second. Nora, like I told you." The cognitive decline. She gets flustered with new faces. "I'm not a new face, Trent," I said, cold as ice. "I am her daughter." I stepped around him. I didn't care about his linen shirt or his expensive watch. I pushed past his blockade and closed the distance to my mother. "Mom," I said softly. I wrapped my arms around her. I expected the familiar softness of the woman who had raised me. I expected the sturdy warmth that had always been my anchor. What I felt made me want to scream. She was frail. Not just aging frail. She felt hollow beneath the heavy fabric of that oversized tunic. I could feel the sharp ridges of her spine. Her shoulder blades felt like razor wires beneath my hands. She was cold. A deep, pervasive chill that seemed to radiate from her bones. I held her. And she stood there, stiff and unyielding, her arms pinned to her sides. She smelled of bleach and old sweat, not the lavender soap she had used for 30 years. "You're freezing," I whispered near her ear. "And you're so thin." "I'm fine," she recited. The words came out flat, mechanical. "I am eating well. I am exercising. I am happy." It sounded like a script. I pulled back and held her by the shoulders, looking her dead in the eye. Close. The damage was undeniable. There were dark purple smudges under her eyes. Her skin was papery and translucent, but it was the hands. Those hands that I was still holding that told the real story. They were raw. The knuckles were swollen and red, the skin around the cuticles cracked and bleeding. These were the hands of someone who spent hours every day in harsh chemicals. "Why are you scrubbing pans?" asked, my voice rising despite my best efforts to keep it calm. "Why are you wearing this uniform? She loves it." Belle breezed into the kitchen, bringing a cloud of expensive perfume that clashed violently with the smell of bleach. She walked over and stood next to Trent, forming a united front. "We tried to stop her," Belle said, shaking her head with a look of mock pity. "Didn't we, Trent? We bought her puzzles. We bought her knitting kits. But she just insists. She gets agitated if she isn't cleaning. The doctor said it's a coping mechanism. It makes her feel useful. So, we let her be." "You let her be," I repeated. I lifted my mother's hand, displaying the raw red skin. "You let her scrub until her hands bleed. It's winter dryness." Belle dismissed, waving a manicured hand. "We put lotion on her every night. She just washes it off." I looked at Mom. "Mom, is that true? Do you want to do this?" Mom looked at me. Then her eyes did that terrible thing again. They flicked to the side. She looked at Belle. Belle was smiling. Tight, polite smile. But her eyes were hard as flint. And Mom started. Her voice was a whisper. "I like to help. I need to earn my." She stopped. She swallowed hard, her throat clicking. "Earn what?" I pressed. "Earn your keep in your own house. Earn my keep." She repeated softly, looking at the floor. "She means earn her sense of purpose. Trent interjected loudly, cutting off whatever she was going to say next. Mom gets confused with words. Aphasia. It's part of the diagnosis. I want to see the diagnosis, I said. Not looking at him. Keeping my eyes on Mom. I want to see the medical files tonight. They're filed away. Trent said quickly. We can look for them tomorrow. Right now. Mom looks tired. Look at her. Nora. You're overwhelming her. He was right about one thing. Mom was trembling. Fine. Continuous tremor ran through her body. I'm not leaving her, I said. I'm sleeping here tonight. The silence that followed was instant and sharp. Trent and Belle exchanged a glance that was not panic anymore. It was calculation. That's not a good idea, Trent said. His voice dropped, becoming serious. Almost professional. We don't have the space prepared. My room. I said. I'll sleep in my old room. It's a gym now. Trent said. There's no bed. Just the Peloton and the weights. I'll sleep on the couch. I said. That big leather sectional you bought with my money. It looks big enough. No. Belle said. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the air. She softened it immediately, forcing a laugh. I mean. No. Nora. That would be terrible. It's not comfortable. And besides, Mom has a very strict night routine. She wakes up if there's anyone else in the house. She wanders. She screams. She screams. I looked at Mom. She was staring at the sink, biting her lip. It's very distressing, Trent said. Stepping closer. Trying to hurt me toward the door. For her sake. Nora, you don't want to trigger an episode on your first night back. It would be selfish. Selfish. The word hung there. I had spent 5 years freezing my blood in the North Sea and he was calling me selfish. There's a Motel 6 down on the highway, Trent suggested. Or the Red Lion. It's nice. We'll pay for it. Thor, we'll pay for it. I don't need your money, I said. I have plenty. I looked at the three of them, Trent and Belle standing shoulder to shoulder, blocking the rest of the house, blocking the truth, and my mother standing slightly behind them, diminished. Silence, fading into the background of her own life. If I pushed this now, if I refused to leave, they would call the police. Or worse, they would take it out on her the second I fell asleep. I needed to be smart. I needed to be the welder who checks the structural integrity before striking the arc. I needed to see the cracks before I applied the pressure. Fine, I said. I let my shoulders slump. I let the exhaustion I truly felt show on my face. You're right. I'm tired. I probably smell like jet fuel. I shouldn't be here like this. The relief on Trent's face was instantaneous and insulting. He exhaled a breath he had been holding. Exactly. You get a good night's sleep. Shower. Change. Come back tomorrow for lunch. We'll have a nice family lunch. Belle will cook. I don't cook. Belle said automatically. We'll order in. I turned to Mom. I'm going to go now. Mom? She looked up. Panic flared in her eyes again. Pure unmasked terror. She took a half step toward me, her hand reaching out before she caught herself and pulled it back. You're going, she whispered. Just for tonight, I said. I reached out and took her wet cold hand. I squeezed it. I wanted to convey a message without words. I am not abandoning you. I am coming back. I will be back first thing in the morning. Okay, she said. Her voice sounded hollow. She pulled her hand away and tucked it back under her apron as if she wasn't allowed to touch me. Okay, walk her out. Babe, Trent said to Belle. I know the way. I said. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I walked through the living room that felt like a mausoleum. I walked out the front door, past the keypad that blinked a red light at me. I walked down the driveway, feeling the camera above the garage tracking my every step. It whirred softly, a mechanical eye making sure the intruder was gone. I didn't call a cab. I walked down the street, my duffel bag heavy on my shoulder. I walked until I turned the corner, out of sight of the camera's lens. Then I stopped. I leaned against a stucco wall, my breath coming in short, angry gasps. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort it took not to turn around and burn that house to the ground. She was dying in there. I saw it in her eyes. It wasn't just confusion or age. It was a slow, systematic eraser. They were erasing her personality, her dignity, and eventually her life. If I went to a hotel, I would be playing by their rules. I would be the guest. I would be the outsider. I pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the screen. I wasn't going to the Red Lion. I wasn't going to sleep. I needed eyes on that house. I needed to know what happened when the guests left and the owners thought they were safe. I opened the map application and typed in motel. I found one 3 blocks away. A dive? The kind of place where people didn't ask questions and paid in cash. I started walking. I wasn't leaving Mesa. I was just going underground. The Starlight Motel was exactly the kind of place people went when they wanted to disappear. It was 3 blocks from the main highway, smelling of stale cigarette smoke and industrial disinfectant. I paid cash for a week in room 112. I did not give them my real name to the night clerk. I was just another transient passing through Mesa, looking for work or running away from trouble. I was doing neither. I was hunting. I stripped off my heavy flannel shirt and cargo pants, trading them for a nondescript gray hoodie and a baseball cap I bought at a gas station. I needed to be invisible. I needed to be a shadow. The Nora Lawson who had marched into that house demanding answers was gone. That tactic had failed. It had only made them raise their shields. Now I needed to be the Nora Lawson who inspected underwater pipelines for microscopic fractures. I needed to watch, wait, and document the decay before I applied the pressure. I parked my rental car, a dented beige sedan that blended into the asphalt down the street from the house on Rosemary Lane. It was a vantage point that offered a clear line of sight to the driveway and the kitchen window, but kept me obscured by the heavy shade of a mosquite tree. I had a notebook on the passenger seat, and a digital camera with a telephoto lens that I had picked up at a pawn shop an hour ago. At 7:45 in the morning, the garage door opened. My brother, Trent, walked out. He was dressed in a sharp navy suit, carrying a leather briefcase. He looked every inch the successful businessman he claimed to be. He paused in the driveway, checked his watch, and tapped something into his phone. He looked stressed. Important. He got into his least luxury SUV and pulled out. I started my engine. I stayed 2 cars back, letting traffic buffer us. I expected him to head toward the financial district in downtown Phoenix. I expected an office building. I expected a job. Instead, Trent drove 4 miles east and pulled into the parking lot of a strip mall. He parked in front of a place called the Broken Spoke. It was a dive bar with blacked-out windows and a neon sign that buzzed even in the daylight. I watched him get out of the car. He loosened his tie. He threw his briefcase into the back seat, not taking it with him, and walked inside. It was 8:30 in the morning. I waited 10 minutes, then walked past the front window. Through a crack in the tint, I saw him, my brother. The self-proclaimed head of the household was sitting at a video poker machine, a beer already in his hand. He wasn't working. He was burning through time and presumably my mother's money. I snapped a photo of his car in the lot. I snapped a photo of the bar sign. I noted the time in my logbook. Subject Trent. Status unemployed. Location bar. I drove back to the house. Now it was Belle's turn. The house was silent from the street, but the dynamic had shifted. Trent was the chaotic element. Belle was the warden. I positioned myself in a small park across the street, sitting on a bench with a newspaper like a cliché, but effective. From here, I had a direct view of the kitchen window. The blinds were open, just as they had been yesterday. They wanted the natural light. Or maybe they just didn't think anyone was watching. At exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon, movement flickered in the window. It was Belle. She was wearing yoga pants and a crop top, holding a phone to her ear. She looked relaxed. She opened the cupboard, the one where I had seen the pill bottle, and took it down. Then she called out. I couldn't hear her through the glass, but I saw the gesture. A sharp wave of the hand. Come here. Mom appeared in the frame. She was still wearing the gray tunic. She walked with that same hesitant, shrinking posture. Belle poured a glass of water. She shook 2 pills out of the unlabeled bottle. She didn't hand them to Mom. She placed them on the counter and pointed. Mom didn't argue. She didn't ask what they were. She picked them up and swallowed them in one quick motion. It wasn't the action of a patient taking medicine. It was the muscle memory of a trained animal following a command to avoid punishment. I raised my camera and held the shutter down. Click, click, click. I caught the bottle. I caught Belle's pointing finger. I caught the look of absolute resignation on my mother's face. I lowered the camera, my hands shaking with a cold rage. This was a schedule. This was chemical restraint. I spent the next 2 days building the timeline. 080. Trent leaves for work. 8:15 Belle dispenses the morning dose.
09 huzuru.
Mom begins cleaning, dusting blinds, mopping floors. Belle sits on the patio or watches TV. 14 Hazuro. Afternoon dose. 17 Hazuro. Trent returns, smelling of mints and deception. 20 Hazuro evening dose. Lights out for Mom. It was a machine. A perfect grinding machine designed to keep Lillian Lawson and Doxel while they lived their life on her dime. On the 3rd day, I decided to test the perimeter. I waited until I saw the neighbor, the old man with the golden retriever, walking past. I stepped out of my car, keeping my hat pulled low, and intercepted him near the corner. "Excuse me," I said, pitching my voice to sound casual. "I'm looking for the Lawson residence. I used to work with Lillian years ago. I thought I'd stop by." The man stopped. He looked at the house, then back at me. "Lillian. Oh, you won't find her. Is she not home?" I asked. "She's there," the man said, lowering his voice. "But she doesn't see people. Her son Trent, right? He told us she has severe dementia. Said she gets violent if strangers come to the door. They keep her locked up tight for her own good. They say violent." I repeated. "My mother wouldn't hurt a fly. She used to carry spiders outside in a cup rather than squish them." That's what he said. The neighbor shrugged. "We haven't seen her out in the garden in 6 months. Used to be she was always out there with her roses. Now it's like a tomb. Sad business. But I guess the boy is doing his best." "Yeah," I said, gripping my keys until they dug into my palm. "He's doing something all right." I walked back to my car. The narrative was set. They had poisoned the well. If I went to the police now without hard proof, the neighbors would back Trent up. Oh yes, the poor son dealing with his crazy mother. I needed to check the financial bloodline. I sat in the hot car and pulled out my burner phone. I dialed the number for the local bank branch where Mom had held her accounts for 30 years. I didn't identify myself. I just asked for hours of operation. Then I asked a general question about statements. If I wanted to switch my mother's statements to digital only, what would I need? Just power of attorney or the account holder's authorization? The teller said cheerfully. I hung up. I logged on to the county assessor's website on my phone. I looked up the property tax records for the house. The bills were being paid, but the mailing address for the tax documents had been changed. It wasn't coming to the house anymore. It was going to a P.O. box in downtown Mesa. I dialed Mom's cell phone number, the one I had called every week for 5 years. "We're sorry. The number you have reached is no longer in service. Disconnected." I sat there feeling the walls closing in. They had cut the lines. They had severed her connection to the world, to her friends, to her money, and to me. I decided to poke the bear. I dialed Trent's mobile number. He answered on the second ring. In the background, I heard the distinctive clinking of glassware and the murmur of a crowd. He was at the bar. "Hello." "Trent," I said. "It's Nora." "Nora." His voice shifted instantly. He sounded breathless, like he was in a rush. "Hey, where are you? We expected you for lunch yesterday. We waited for an hour. I got caught up." "Elite." "I'm staying with a friend in Phoenix. Just needed to decompress." "Oh, good. Good," he said. "Take your time. No rush." I tried to call Mom. I said, "Her number is dead." There was a pause. A beat of silence where he calculated the lie. "Yeah, about that," Trent said. His voice smooth as oil. "We had to cut it. The spam calls were out of control." Nora. She was getting confused. People were trying to scam her. You know how seniors are. We decided it was safer to just get rid of the landline and the cell. If you want to talk to her, just call me or Belle. We'll put her on. She's not a child." "Trent," I said. "She's vulnerable." "Nora," he shot back, his tone turning patronizing. "I'm the one here dealing with it every day. I'm the one changing the sheets. I'm the one managing her episodes. Don't second-guess me from a hotel room." "I'm not second-guessing," I said. "I'm just asking why my mother can't have a phone." "Because I said so," Trent snapped. Then he caught himself. "Because the doctor said so. Look, I have to go. I'm stepping into a meeting. Big merger. I'll tell her you called." Click. He hung up. A meeting. He was sitting in a dive bar at 11 in the morning, drinking away the money I had sent to pay off the mortgage, telling me he was protecting our mother from scams. The irony was so sharp it tasted like blood. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the phone. I wrote it down. 11:15. Trent claims to be in a meeting. Confirmed at bar. Admits to cutting Mom's communication lines. That night, I went back to the house. It was dark. The streetlights cast long orange shadows on the pavement. I parked further away this time and approached on foot, sticking to the shadows of the neighbors' hedges. The house was glowing. The massive television in the living room was on, casting a flickering blue light against the blackout shades. I moved to the side of the house. There was a gap in the fence. A loose board I used to sneak through when I was a teenager. It was still there. I squeezed through. Ignoring the scratch of the wood against my jacket, I crept into the backyard. The cameras were focused on the gates and the doors. There was a blind spot near the patio right by the sliding glass door. I knew the angles because I had installed the original motion lights years ago. I pressed myself against the stucco, inching closer to the glass. The curtains were drawn, but there was a gap. A sliver of visibility about 2 in wide. I looked inside. The living room was bathed in the cool light of the TV. Trent was sprawled on the white leather sofa. A beer bottle balanced on his chest. He was laughing at something on the screen. Belle was next to him, scrolling on a tablet, her feet propped up on the coffee table. They looked comfortable. They looked like the owners of the world. And then I saw her. Mom was in the background in the kitchen area that opened into the living room. She was standing. She wasn't watching TV. She wasn't sitting with them. She was standing by the island holding a rag. She was wiping the counter over and over again. The same spot. Small circular motions. She looked exhausted. Her head was drooping. Her eyes heavy. It was past 9 o'clock. She should be in bed according to their schedule. But they hadn't dismissed her yet. Trent said something, gesturing toward the kitchen without looking away from the TV. Mom flinched. She immediately put down the rag and hurried to the fridge. She pulled out 2 more beers. She opened them. Her hands shaking so hard I thought she would drop the bottle opener. She walked over to the sofa. She placed the beers on the coasters. Trent didn't say thank you. Belle didn't look up. They acted as if the beer had been delivered by a ghost. As if the woman who had birthed him, the woman who had scrubbed floors to feed him, was nothing more than an appliance that dispensed alcohol. Mom backed away. She didn't sit down. She returned to the kitchen island and picked up her rag. She went back to wiping the clean counter, her eyes fixed on the granite, waiting for the next command. I stood there in the dark, my breath fogging the glass. My heart wasn't breaking. It was calcifying. I raised my camera one last time. I focused the lens through the gap in the curtains. I took the picture. Click. The evidence of their cruelty was locked in digital memory. But the image of my mother, reduced to a trembling servant in the home I had bought for her freedom, was burned into my soul. I lowered the camera. I had enough. I knew the routine. I knew the players. I knew the crime. Now I needed to dismantle it. And I wasn't going to do it with a welder's torch. I was going to do it with a wrecking ball. The collapse happened on Thursday night. 3 days into my surveillance. I was positioned in the neighbor's side yard, shielded by a trellis of overgrown ivy that Mrs. Gable had neglected for years. The angle gave me a direct line of sight into the kitchen through the sliding glass door. It was 7:30 in the evening. According to the schedule I had documented, this was the time my mother usually finished the dinner cleanup before receiving her night medication at 8 o'clock. Inside the brightly lit aquarium of the living room, the scene was playing out with sickening familiarity. Trent was on the sofa scrolling through his phone. Belle was painting her nails at the dining table. A bottle of wine opened next to her. My mother was at the sink. She was scrubbing a heavy cast iron skillet. I could see the strain in her neck muscles. She looked thinner than she had even 2 days ago. Her skin pallid and gray under the harsh recessed lighting. Then she stopped. Her hand froze on the handle of the skillet. She swayed. It was a subtle movement at first, like a tree catching a sudden gust of wind. Then her knees buckled. She reached out, grasping for the granite countertop, but her fingers found no purchase. She went down. There was no sound from where I stood behind the glass in the distance, but I saw the vibration of the impact. The skillet hit the floor. My mother crumpled into a heap of gray fabric in exhaustion. Trent did not jump up. He looked over the back of the sofa, annoyed. Belle paused her painting, looking toward the kitchen with an expression of mild inconvenience. They were not rushing to her. They were waiting for her to get up. A roar of pure white-hot adrenaline flooded my system. I did not think. I did not calculate. The surveillance was over. The extraction began now. I vaulted over the low block wall separating the yards. I sprinted across the artificial turf, my boots digging into the plastic grass. I reached the sliding glass door in 4 seconds. It was locked. I didn't bother with the keypad. I didn't bother knocking. I grabbed the heavy metal patio chair sitting near the fire pit. I swung it with every ounce of strength I had built, hauling steel on the North Sea rigs. The sound of shattering safety glass was deafening. It exploded inward like a diamond rain. Trent screamed. Belle shrieked and knocked her wine bottle over. I stepped through the broken frame, crunching glass under my boots. "What the hell?" Trent yelled, scrambling off the sofa, his face white with terror. "Who is Nora? Are you insane?" I didn't look at him. I walked straight to the kitchen. My mother was lying on the tile. Her eyes were half open, rolling back in her head. Her breathing was shallow and rapid. "Mom," I said, dropping to my knees beside her. I ignored the glass biting into my jeans. I checked her pulse. It was thready and fast. Her skin was clammy. She just slipped. Belle stammered, standing in the dining room, clutching her nail polish. "She's clumsy. We told you she's clumsy. She didn't slip." I snarled without looking up. She collapsed. I scooped my arms under her. She weighed nothing. It was like lifting a bundle of dry sticks. The realization made bile rise in my throat. She had lost at least 20 pounds since I left. "I'm calling 911, Trent said, pulling out his phone. His hands shaking. "No," I said. I stood up, holding my mother against my chest. "You are not touching her. You are not coming near her. You can't just take her," Trent shouted, trying to muster some authority, but failing miserably against the rage radiating off me.
Jeg am her, caregiver.
"You are breaking and entering. I am her daughter," I said, my voice low and lethal. "And if you try to stop me, Trent, I will put you in the hospital right next to her." I walked out the front door. I didn't look back. I carried her to my rental car parked down the street, laid her in the back seat, and drove like a maniac toward Banner Desert Medical Center. The emergency room smelled of antiseptic and anxiety. I paced the small cubicle while the nurses worked. They had hooked her up to 4 fluids and a heart monitor. The steady beep 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 was the only thing keeping me grounded. A doctor walked in after 40 minutes. He was a young man with tired eyes. "Dear Aries." He held a clipboard and looked at me with a mixture of professional detachment and suspicion. "You are the daughter?" he asked. "Yes, Nora Lawson. And the woman who brought her in? That's me. Right?" he said, making a note. "Your mother is severely dehydrated. Lawson. Her electrolyte levels are critically low. She is showing signs of advanced malnutrition. When was the last time she ate a full meal?" "I don't know," I said, my voice tight. "I just got back to the country 3 days ago. I found her like this." The doctor looked at me over his glasses. "We also ran a standard toxicology screen because of her altered mental state." My heart hammered. "And does your mother have a prescription for benzodiazepine, specifically alprazolam, or something similar?" "No." I said. "She takes blood pressure medication. That's it." Dr. Aris tapped the clipboard. "Her blood work shows a high concentration of sedatives, and based on the accumulation in her system, she has been taking them for a long time. Month. Maybe longer." I gripped the metal railing of the bed. The unlabeled bottle. The schedule. "Is that why she's confused?" I asked. "Is that why she looks like she has dementia? Chronic use of sedatives in elderly patients can mimic dementia," the doctor said gravely. "Causes memory loss, confusion, motor control issues, and lethargy if she has been kept on a constant dose coupled with the malnutrition. It would explain her current state entirely. She isn't deteriorating naturally. Lawson. She's being chemically suppressed." The room spun. It wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just greed. It was biological warfare. They were systematically poisoning her to make her pliable. They were manufacturing a decline to justify their control. "Will she recover?" I asked with fluids and by flushing the drugs out of her system. "Yet," he said, "her brain function should return. But we need to keep her here for observation." NMS. Lawson. "Yet, I am legally required to report this to Adult Protective Services. This looks like neglect. Possibly abuse." "Good," I said. "Do it." It was 3 o'clock in the morning when she finally woke up. The fluids had done their work. The color was returning to her cheeks, and her eyes, though tired, were clear. The glassy drugged film was gone. "Nora," she croaked. I was sitting in the plastic chair next to her bed, holding her hand. "I'm here, Mom. You're safe. You're in the hospital." She looked around the room, panic flaring for a brief second before she realized Trent wasn't there. She squeezed my hand. Her grip was weak, but it was there. "They said you weren't coming back," she whispered. Tears pulled in the corners of her eyes and slid down her temples. "Who said that?" "Trent. Belle," she said. "They told me you got married in Europe. They said you needed the money from the house to start a business. They said you didn't want to be burdened with an old woman anymore." "That is a lie," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I sent every penny to pay off the house for you. I came back to live with you. They took my phone," she said, her voice trembling. "They said I was calling people and talking nonsense. They said I was embarrassing the family. Trent told me if I didn't behave, if I didn't help around the house to earn my keep, the state would take me." "The state?" "He said the nursing homes run by the state are terrible places." She sobbed. "He said they tie people to beds. He said he was saving me from that. He said I had to be good. I had to take my medicine so I wouldn't be crazy." I brushed the hair off her forehead. My rage was a cold, hard knot in my chest. They had used her deepest fear, abandonment, and loss of independence to enslave her. "You are never going to a home," promised. "And you are never going back to that house with them. But the papers," she said, her eyes widening. "Nora, the papers." "What papers, Mom?" "I don't know," she cried. "It was a few months ago. I was so tired. The medicine made me so sleepy. Trent brought a man, a notary. He was nice. He said it was for insurance to make sure Trent could talk to the doctors for me, to make sure the bills got paid." "Did you sign them?" "I think so," she whispered. "Trent held my hand. He helped me hold the pen. He said it was the only way to keep the house safe." A chill went down my spine. And papers didn't require a notary in the living room. "Rest?" "Mom," I said. "I need to check something." I waited until she drifted back into a natural sleep. Then I pulled out my phone. I didn't go to the police yet. I needed to know exactly what legal bear trap they had set. I logged onto the Maricopa County Superior Court's public access portal. I searched for Lawson Lillian. Nothing under criminal. I switched to civil probate. There it was. Case number PB 2023-09482. In the matter of the guardianship and conservatorship of Lillian Marie Lawson, an adult petitioner Trent Lawson's status pending final hearing. I opened the case summary. The filing date was 4 months ago. The petition claimed that Lillian Lawson was suffering from rapid onset dementia and was incapacitated and unable to manage her financial affairs or daily care. Attached to the filing was a physician's affidavit signed by a Dr. Arrington, the same doctor who prescribed the sedatives. But that wasn't the worst part. I scrolled down to the latest docket entry. Motion for approval of real estate transaction. They weren't just taking control of her. They were asking the court for permission to sell the house. The justification listed was to liquidate assets for the necessary long-term residential care of the ward. They were going to sell the house I paid for, dump my mother in the cheapest facility they could find and pocket the equity as the conservators of her estate. And because they had established this legal framework, if I simply took her home, they could call the police and have me arrested for kidnapping a ward of the state. They had weaponized the law. I looked at the date of the final hearing. It was in 6 days. If I hadn't come home, if I hadn't broken that window in 6 days, my mother would have legally ceased to be a person. She would have become property. I put the phone down on the tray table. My hands were perfectly steady now. The shaking was gone. The welder in me took over. When you find a structural defect that deep, you don't just patch it. You cut the whole section out. I couldn't just scream at them. I couldn't just beat Trent up. Much as I wanted to. If I acted emotionally, I would look like the unstable sister interfering with a legal guardianship. I would play right into their narrative. I needed to be smarter. I needed to let the trap snap shut. But I needed to make sure their fingers were the ones inside it when it did. I looked at my mother sleeping peacefully for the first time in months without drugs in her veins. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "You want a legal battle? Let's go to war." I picked up my phone and dialed the number of the only person I knew who hated bullies more than I did. A lawyer named Miles Keegan who had represented my union in a dispute 3 years ago. It was 4 in the morning. He wouldn't answer. But I left a voicemail. "Miles, it's Nora Lawson. I have a job for you. It involves guardianship fraud, elder abuse, and a house in Mesa. Call me. I have money and I want to bury someone." The office of Keegan and Rowe Legal was not in a glass skyscraper downtown. It was in a converted brick warehouse in the Arts District, a place that smelled of old coffee and aggressive litigation. Miles Keegan did not look like the lawyers on television who wore 3-piece suits and spoke in riddles. He was a man in his late 40s with rolled-up sleeves, a tie he had loosened 3 hours ago, and eyes that looked like they had seen every variety of human greed imaginable. I sat across from him at a heavy oak table that was covered in files. I had not slept in 24 hours, but I was running on a cold, high-octane fuel of fury. "Guardianship is a fortress, Nora," Miles said, leaning back in his chair and tossing a pen onto the table. "The law is designed to protect the vulnerable, but in the wrong hands, it is the perfect weapon for theft. Once the court grants it, your brother effectively becomes your mother. He decides where she lives, who she sees, and how her money is spent. Undoing it is 10 times harder than setting it up. He doesn't have it yet. I said it is pending final hearing, which is in 6 days. Miles corrected me. That means we are not fighting a siege. We are fighting a blitzkrieg. If that gavel drops next week, he wins. He sells the house. He moves the money and he puts your mother in a state facility. By the time you unravel it on appeal, the money will be gone and the house will have new owners. So what do? I asked. "We don't just defend," Miles said, his voice dropping to a low, serious register. "We attack. But I cannot go into that courtroom with just your anger. Judges hate family drama. They hear," he said. She said all day long. "If you go in there shouting that he is evil, the judge will see a jealous sister. I need facts. I need paper. I need independent third-party verification that Trent Lawson is not a caregiver but a predator." He pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and started writing a list. "1. He said medical. You said the toxicology report showed sedatives. I need that certified. I need a timeline of ingestion versus the date those initial guardianship papers were signed. 2. He continued. "Yes. You need to call Adult Protective Services immediately. Today. Right now. We need an open case number once APS is involved." The court freezes. They will not grant a permanent guardianship while an active abuse investigation is pending. 3. He said, circling the number. "The neighborhood. You said they had cameras. You said the neighbors were weird. Go back there. Knock on doors. People do not want to get involved in domestic disputes, but everyone wants to help a victim who was carried away in an ambulance. Find me someone who saw something." I stood up. "I'll get it," Nora, Miles said, stopping me before I reached the door. "Do not engage with your brother. If he calls, you do not answer. If he shows up at the hospital, you call security. He is going to realize very soon that he is losing control. Desperate people do dangerous things." I made the call to Adult Protective Services from the parking lot. It was a 20-minute conversation that felt like an interrogation, but I gave them everything. I gave them the case number of the guardianship petition. I gave them Dr. Aries's name at the hospital. I gave them the details of the isolation. By the time I hung up, I had a reference number and a promise that a caseworker would be at the hospital within 24 hours to interview Mom. That was the shield. Now I needed the sword. I drove back to Rosemary Lane. It was mid-morning. The cul-de-sac was quiet. My rental car felt conspicuous, but I didn't care anymore. I wasn't hiding in the bushes. I was conducting an investigation. I started with Mrs. Higgins. When she opened her door, she looked terrified. She saw me standing there, not in my work clothes, but in clean jeans and a determined expression, and she started to close the door. She is in the hospital. Mrs. Higgins, I said loudly, jamming my boot against the frame. My mother is in the hospital with severe malnutrition and enough sedatives in her blood to kill a horse. They carried her out last night. Mrs. Higgins stopped. Her hand trembled on the doorknob. The color drained from her face. "Oh, dear God," she whispered. "I know you saw things," I said, my voice softening but losing none of its intensity. "I know you saw the changes. If you don't talk to me, if you don't help me stop them, she is never coming back to this house. They are going to sell it and put her away." Mrs. Higgins opened the door wider. She looked at the Lawson house across the street, a look of guilt washing over her features. I heard the yelling, she admitted, her voice shaking. Not from Lillian. From the girl.
Belle.
I heard her screaming at your mother in the backyard. Terrible things. Telling her she was useless. Telling her to scrub harder. When? I asked, pulling out my notebook. 2 weeks ago. Maybe 3. She said. And I saw Lillian trying to leave once. I looked up from my writing. She tried to leave. It was about a month ago. Mrs. Higgins said, wringing her hands. She was walking down the driveway. She had a bag. A plastic grocery bag with clothes in it. She looked so confused. Belle came running out. She didn't guide her back. Nora. She grabbed her. She grabbed her by the arm and yanked her so hard Lillian almost fell. She dragged her back inside and I heard the lock beep. I should have called someone. I just thought she was sick. Trent told us she was dangerous. "Will you sign a statement?" I asked. "Will you write down exactly what you just told me and sign it for a lawyer?" Mrs. Higgins looked at the house again. Then she looked at me. "Yes. Yes, I will." I went to 3 more houses. The story was the same. The neighbors had been fed a narrative that Lillian was violent and demented, but their eyes had seen a frail, frightened woman being bullied. One neighbor, a retired mechanic named Mr. told me he had seen Trent selling items from the garage, my father's tools, the lawnmower, the antique clock, early on Saturday mornings when the street was quiet. He was liquidating the estate before he even owned it. But the rail break came from the house directly across the street. The owner was a man named David King. He was a tech guy, a software engineer who worked from home. His house was rigged with more smart devices than the space shuttle. When I knocked, he answered wearing a headset. He listened to my spiel, his face unreadable. When I mentioned the legal battle, he held up a hand. "Hold on," he said. He disappeared into his office and came back with a tablet. "I have a Ring doorbell," David said. "And I have 2 perimeter cameras that cover my driveway and part of the street. They pick up motion. Your mom's driveway is in the background of my feed." He tapped the screen. "I saw the ambulance last night. It made me curious. So, I went back through my cloud storage. I keep 30 days of footage." He turned the tablet toward me. The video was time-stamped 14 days ago. It was high definition. The video showed a delivery driver walking up to my mother's porch. He was carrying a small box. It looked like a pharmacy delivery. The door opened. My mother stepped out. She looked lucid. She reached for the package. Suddenly, Belle appeared from behind the door. She didn't just step out. She lunged on the clear digital screen. I watched Belle shove my mother backward into the foyer. It was a physical, violent shove. My mother stumbled and disappeared into the shadows of the house. Belle stepped out, grabbed the package from the stunned driver, said something aggressive that the microphone didn't pick up, and then slammed the door. But that wasn't all. David swiped to another video. Timestamp 5 days ago. It showed Trent and a man in a cheap suit standing on the porch. The notary. I suspected they were arguing. The audio was faint, but David had enhanced it. I can't notarize it if she's asleep. Trent. The man in the suit was saying. She's not asleep. She's just relaxed. Trent's voice was clear. Just stamp the damn thing. I'll guide her hand. You get your $500 and you get out. The man hesitated, looked around the street, looking right at David's camera without realizing it, and then nodded. Fine. But if this comes back on me, I was never here. My blood ran cold. It was conspiracy. It was fraud. And it was recorded in 1080p resolution. Can I get a copy of these? I asked David, my voice steady. Despite the pounding in my chest, I need the raw files. Metadata included. I'll email them to you right now, David said. I never liked that guy. He parks his SUV in front of my hydrant. I returned to the hospital with a flash drive in my pocket that felt heavier than a gold bar. Dr. Aris met me in the hallway. He looked grim. We got the toxicology panel back from the lab. He said it confirms the initial screen. High levels of alprazolam and zolpidem. But there is something else. He handed me a piece of paper. We ran a hair follicle test. He said it gives us a longer history of drug exposure. Your mother has been heavily sedated for at least 6 months. But looking at the levels, there are spikes. Massive spikes in dosage that correspond to specific dates. I looked at the dates on the chart. One spike was 5 months ago, the date the guardianship petition was filed. Another spike was 3 weeks ago, the date on the real estate listing agreement I had found online. They were drugging her into a stupor specifically on the days they needed her to be compliant or incapacitated for legal purposes. I need you to write a statement, I said to Dr. Aris. I need you to state medically that on the dates of these spikes, Lillian Lawson would have been chemically incapable of giving informed consent to any legal document. Can do that, Dr. Aris said. Because it is the truth. Back at the law office, the atmosphere had shifted from a consultation to a war room. Miles Keegan watched the video footage from David's doorbell camera. He watched it 3 times. He didn't smile. But his eyes narrowed in a way that terrified me. This is it, Miles said. This is the kill shot. He started pacing the room, dictating notes to his paralegal, a sharp young woman named Sarah, who was typing fast enough to set the keyboard on fire. We are filing an emergency ex parte motion for a temporary restraining order, Miles barked. We are filing a motion to suspend the current powers of attorney. We are filing a formal objection to the guardianship petition with prejudice. He turned to me. And we are filing a list pendants on the property immediately. What is that? I asked. Latin for suit pending. Miles explained. It is a public notice filed with the county recorder that tells the world there is a legal battle over this house. It effectively kills the title. No title company will insure it. No bank will finance it. No buyer will touch it. Trent can try to sell that house, but he won't be able to close. We are locking the asset down. He picked up the stack of affidavit I had collected. Mrs. Higgins. Mr. The other neighbors. He placed the thumb drive on top of them. We aren't just going to stop the guardianship, Nora, Miles said, looking at the file. With this footage of the notary and the toxicology report, we are going to pivot. I am going to draft a referral to the district attorney's office For what? For fraud. Miles said. For forgery. For elder abuse. And for conspiracy to commit theft. He looked at the clock. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The courthouse closes in an hour. Miles said. Sarah. Get the runner. We are filing today. By the time Trent wakes up tomorrow morning, his authority over your mother will be suspended. His bank accounts will be flagged. And he won't be able to sell a doorknob off that house. I sat back in the chair for the first time since I stepped off the plane. I didn't feel like I was drowning. I felt like the tide was turning. One more thing, Miles said, looking at me. Trent doesn't know we have this. He thinks you are just a hysterical sister making noise. He thinks he can smooth talk the judge at the hearing next week. Let him think that. I said. Exactly. Miles nodded. We let him walk into that courtroom thinking he is the smartest man in the room, and then we dropped the sky on his head. I looked at the picture of my mother on my phone taken in the hospital bed. She looked weak. But she was awake. She was mine again. File it, I said. Lock the doors. The office of Knoxfield Investigations was located in a strip mall off the highway, sandwiched between a bail bondsman and a vape shop. It was unassuming. The kind of place you would drive past 1,000 times without noticing. But inside, it was a fortress of information. Serena Knox was nothing like the private investigators in the movies. She did not wear a trench coat, and she did not drink whiskey at noon. She was a woman in her 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a bank of computer monitors that hummed with enough processing power to launch a satellite. She was a former forensic accountant turned investigator, and she chased paper trails like a bloodhound chases a scent. I sat in a folding chair while Serena pulled up a spiderweb of data on her main screen. I had given her a retainer of $5,000, a significant chunk of my remaining savings. But Miles Keegan had insisted she was the best at finding what people didn't want found. You were right about the money, Serena said, not bothering with small talk. She tapped a key and a spreadsheet expanded. And you were right about the drugs. But the mechanics of it. It is smarter than I gave your brother credit for. Or at least more desperate. Show me. I said. Serena pointed to the left screen. It displayed a series of photos taken with a high-powered telephoto lens. The timestamp was from 2 days ago. The photos showed getting out of her car in the parking lot of a building called Azure Holistics. It looked like a high-end spa with frosted glass windows and a logo of a lotus flower. This place advertises itself as a wellness center, Serena explained, her voice dry. Vitamin drips. Anti-aging. Hormone balancing. But that is just the front. In the back, they run a very lucrative cash and carry business for prescription pharmaceuticals. No insurance. No electronic records sent to the state monitoring database. You pay 3 times the market price and you walk out with whatever you want. She clicked to the next photo. It showed Belle handing a thick white envelope to a woman in scrubs at the back door. In return, Belle received a small brown paper bag. That bag contained the alprazolam and the sedatives. Serena said. I have a source who used to work the reception desk there. She confirmed Belle Lawson is a regular. She comes in every 2 weeks like clockwork. The buy is always $500 cash. So there is no paper trail, I said. Feeling the anger simmering in my gut. There is always a paper trail, Nora. Serena corrected me. You just have to look at where the cash comes from. She swiveled her chair to the right screen. This was the financial autopsy. I ran a trace on the funds you sent for the mortgage payoff. Serena said. You sent $200,000 to a joint account that listed your mother and Trent as co-signers. You assumed Trent would use it to pay the bank. He sent me a confirmation email, I said. He sent you a Photoshop edit, Serena said bluntly. The mortgage was never paid off. The bank is still taking monthly withdrawals from your mother's pension. The lump sum you sent. It was moved out of the joint account in 48 hours. She highlighted a series of transactions. It went into a digital wallet, she said. Then it was bounced through 3 different peer-to-peer payment apps: Venmo, Cash App, Zelle. Finally, it landed in a private account at a credit union in Scottsdale. That account is in Trent's name only. I stared at the numbers. My life's work. The freezing nights on the rig. The danger. All of it siphoned off so Trent could play the big man. But here is where it gets interesting, Serena said, leaning in. Trent is bleeding money. He is not just hoarding it. He is spending it. Online gambling. Crypto speculation that went bust. Luxury car leases. He is burning through your money at a rate of $10,000 a month. He is almost broke. Nora. That is why he needs the house. He needs to sell it to refill the pot. I realized. Exactly. Serena said. But to sell the house, he needs your mother's signature. And since your mother is not legally competent to sign because he has her drugged, he needs a workaround. She pulled up a new set of data points. It was a calendar view. I cross-referenced the cash withdrawals from Trent's account with his location history. Serena said. I tracked his phone data. It is scary how easy it is to buy that information if you have the right license. She pointed to a recurring pattern. Every time Trent withdraws exactly $300 in cash, he drives to the same location 20 minutes later. A strip mall coffee shop on the east side. Who does he meet? I asked. Serena pulled up a photo. It was grainy, taken from a distance, but the face was clear enough. It was a man with a nervous expression holding a notary stamp and a leather folio. Graham Lark, Serena said. He is a mobile notary. He lost his license in Nevada 5 years ago for fraud, but he managed to get one here in Arizona. He is known in certain circles as a blind stamp. You pay him and he will notarize a signature without the person being present. Or he will notarize a signature from someone who is clearly not in their right mind. I looked at the man's face. This was the man from David King's doorbell video. The man who had argued with Trent on the porch. So Trent pays Graham Lark to fake Mom's signature on legal documents. I said. It gets worse, Serena said. I pulled the public records from the county recorder's office this morning. Look at this. She handed me a printout. It was a document titled Durable Power of Attorney for Financial Management. It was dated 4 months ago. The signature at the bottom read. It was shaky, barely legible. And right next to it was the stamp of Graham Lark. This document gives Trent total control. Serena said it gives him the right to sell, lease, or mortgage any real estate she owns. He filed this before he even applied for the guardianship. The guardianship is just the backup plan to make it look legitimate to the court. But this is the key to the front door. He's going to sell the house. I said he is not going to sell it, Nora. Serena said. Her voice grave. He has already sold it. My heart stopped. What? Serena slapped a glossy brochure onto the desk. It was a listing from a boutique agency called Cinder Cove Really. This was never listed on the open market. Serena said it was a pocket listing. That means they sell it privately to investors without putting a sign in the yard. It keeps the neighbors from asking questions. I followed Trent and Belle yesterday. They spent 2 hours at the Cinderove office. She showed me photos of them walking out of a sleek, modern office building. They were shaking hands with a man in a shark skin suit. Trent was laughing. Belle was beaming. They looked like they had just won the lottery. I did some digging into Cinder Cove. Serena said they specialize in distressed assets and quick cash closes. They buy homes for 70% of market value and flip them. They don't care about the family history. They just care about the deed. When I asked, when does it happen? Serena looked at her watch. I called the title company pretending to be Belle's assistant. I said I needed to confirm the wire instructions for the proceeds. The closing is scheduled for this Friday, 2 days from now. The room seemed to tilt 2 days. If that sale closes, Serena said, If the title transfers to Sind and then Sind sells it to a third party, Nora, you will never get that house back. The law protects bona fide purchasers. If a stranger buys it, not knowing about the fraud, the court won't take the house from them. They will just order Trent to pay you back in Trent. She pointed to the bank account with the dwindling balance. Trent will be in Mexico or bankrupt before the ink is dry. She said he is cashing out. He is going to take the equity, maybe $300,000 and run. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the concrete floor. Can I keep these? Asked, pointing to the photos and the bank traces. They are yours, Serena said. She handed me a thick manila folder. I also put a copy of the audio file I recorded when I called the title company. It proves they are expecting to wire funds to Trent's personal account. Not a trust for your mother. You're good, I said. I'm expensive. Serena replied with a tight smile. Go get him. I drove straight to Miles Keegan's office. I didn't knock. I walked past the receptionist and threw the folder onto his desk. Friday, I said. They are closing on Friday. Miles opened the folder. He scanned the photos of the notary, the fake power of attorney, and the printout from Cinder Cove. Really? His face hardened. This power of attorney is a forgery, Miles said, pointing to the signature. Look at the slant. Your mother is left-handed, isn't she? Yet, I said. The ink drag is from a right-handed writer. Miles observed instantly. Trent signed this or Graham Lark did. It doesn't matter. It is void. It doesn't matter if it's void if they sell the house on Friday, I said. My voice rising. Miles, we have 48 hours. We have less than that. Miles said. Closing isn't an event. It's a process. They probably already signed the final papers yesterday at that meeting you saw. The only thing left is the funding and the recording of the deed. He hit the intercom button on his phone. Sarah. Get the emergency judge on the line now. Tell them we have an imminent fraudulent transfer of real property involving a vulnerable adult. Use the words irreparable harm. He looked back at me. We need to stop the money. If Cinderove wires that cash to Trent, it's gone. What about the list pendants? I asked. You said that would stop it. We filed it yesterday, Miles said. But the county recorder is backed up. It might not show up in the title search for another day or two. If Cinderove checked the title last week, they think it is clean. They are proceeding in good faith. So, we have to tell them, I said. We have to do more than tell them, Miles said. We have to scare the living hell out of them. He grabbed his jacket. I am going to the title company personally. I am going to serve them with a notice of adverse claim. If they release those funds after being notified of fraud, they become liable. No title officer in the world will risk their license for a $300,000 deal. What do? I asked. You go to the house, Miles said. Not to fight. To witness. If Cinder Cove sends an inspector or a final walkthrough person, you make sure they know the seller is in a hospital bed recovering from poisoning. You make sure they know the house is a crime scene. And Trent is going to find out his payday is frozen, Miles said grimly. When he does, he is going to panic. He might try to run. He might try to destroy evidence. Let him try, I said. Nora, Miles warned. Be careful. A rat is most dangerous when you block the exit. I drove back to Rosemary Lane. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the neighborhood. The house looked the same. Perfect. Manicured. Silent. But now I saw it for what it was. It wasn't a home. It was a piggy bank that my brother was trying to smash open. I parked in the driveway right in the middle, blocking the garage. I got out and walked to the front door. The camera whirred above me. I looked directly into the lens. I know. I said to the camera. I know about Graham Lark. I know about Cinder Cove. And I know about the closing. I didn't expect an answer. But the red light on the camera blinked rapidly, then went solid. Someone was watching. I walked back to my car and sat on the hood. I wasn't leaving. I was the guard dog now. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Serena. One more thing. I dug into Graham Lark's history. He doesn't just notarize. He facilitates. I found a wire transfer from Lark to a shipping consultant in Nalas yesterday. Trent isn't just planning to run. He's planning to disappear. I looked at the house. Trent wasn't there. His car was gone. Belle's car was gone. They weren't inside waiting for the closing. They were already stripping the assets. I walked over to the garage window and shined my flashlight inside. The garage was empty. The tools were gone. The boxes of family albums were gone. Even the lawnmower was gone. But in the corner, piled haphazardly, were trash bags. Black plastic bags filled with things they deemed worthless. I saw the corner of a quilt sticking out of one bag. It was the quilt my grandmother had made. I saw a photo frame with the glass broken. They hadn't packed my mother's things. They had thrown them away. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was an eraser. They wanted to wipe Lily and Lawson off the face of the earth so they could consume what she left behind. I took a picture of the trash bags. I sent it to Miles. They cleared the house. Type. They are ready to bolt. Miles replied instantly. Title company served. Funds frozen. The check will bounce. Get ready. I put the phone in my pocket. I crossed my arms and stared at the empty street. The trap was set. The exit was blocked. Now I just had to wait for the rat to come back for his cheese. I sat in the passenger seat of Miles Keegan's car, parked 2 blocks away from a Starbucks in downtown Mesa. My phone felt like a grenade in my hand. It was 10 o'clock in the morning on Friday, the day the sale of my mother's house was supposed to close. The day the money was supposed to vanish. Do it, Miles said. He was staring out the window, his face unreadable. They are panicked. They know the funds are frozen, but they don't know the extent of what we have. They think it is a glitch. They think it is a temporary hold caused by the APS complaint. Give them the way out. I took a deep breath. I had to swallow every ounce of pride I had. I had to become the defeated, overwhelmed sister they wanted me to be. I typed the text to Trent. I am tired. Trent. Mom is sick and I can't afford a lawyer anymore. I just want this over. If I withdraw the complaint, will you promise she gets good care? Can we talk? I hit send. The response came in less than 30 seconds. Thank God you're being reasonable. Meet us at the Hyatt lobby in 20 minutes. We can fix this. He took the bait. I said, showing the screen to Miles. Good. Miles said. He started the car. Remember the rules. Nora, you are not the executioner today. You are the victim. You are confused. You are scared. You let them explain how the world works to you. The more they explain, the more they hang themselves. He reached into the back seat and pulled out a small black device. It looked like a car key fob. Audio recorder. He said. High fidelity. Keep it in your hand or on the table. Arizona is a one-party consent state. As long as you are part of the conversation, you can record it. And you? I asked. I am just your friend, Miles said, adjusting his tie to look less like a shark and more like a tired bureaucrat. I am just here to help you read the paperwork. I won't say a word until I have to. The lobby of the Hyatt Regency was cool and smelled of lees and floor wax. We found a table in the corner, far enough from the concierge to be private, but open enough to be witnessed. Trent and Belle walked in 5 minutes late. They were moving with a frantic, Nervous energy. Trent looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. His eyes were bloodshot, and his expensive suit looked rumpled. Belle was wearing oversized sunglasses, which he took off as she sat down, revealing dark circles she hadn't bothered to cover with makeup. They saw me. They saw the slump in my shoulders. They saw the lack of fight in my eyes. Nora, Trent said, exhaling a breath that smelled of stale coffee and mints. He didn't hug me. He sat down opposite me, placing a leather portfolio on the table. Belle sat next to him, clutching her purse like a shield. Who is this? Belle asked, looking at Miles with suspicion. This is Miles, I said softly. He's a friend. He used to work in contracts. I asked him to come just to make sure I understand everything. My head is spinning. We don't need outsiders. Trent snapped. Can leave, Miles said, making a show of gathering his things. If you want to handle this alone. Nora. No, I said, reaching for his arm. Please stay. I don't want to make a mistake. Trent looked at the clock. He was desperate. He needed that title hold lifted before the business day ended. Fine, Trent said. Whatever. Let's just get this done. He leaned across the table, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Look. Nora, I know things got heated. I know you're emotional about the house. But you have to understand. We are doing this for Mom. The house is a money pit. It's too big for her. The maintenance alone is killing us. I sent money. I said. I sent $200,000. That went to debts. Belle interjected quickly. Old debts. Your dad left a mess. A lie. My father had zero debt when he died. But I nodded. Okay. So the house has to go. It's already sold. Nora, Trent said. That's the problem. We have a buyer. A cash buyer. They are ready to wire the funds today. But because you called APS and filed that thing with the county, the title company froze the deal. If we don't unfreeze it by 5 o'clock, the buyer walks. And if they walk, we lose everything. We lose the money for Mom's care. I don't want Mom to lose her care, I said. Looking down at my hands, I just want to know she will be safe. She will be in the best facility in Scottsdale, Belle said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. Private room. Garden view. But we need $50,000 for the deposit. We get that from the sale. And the rest of the money? I asked. The house is worth $400,000. Trent, where does the rest go? Trent shifted in his seat. Goes into a trust. A managed trust for her expenses. Can I see the trust documents? Miles asked. His voice was mild, curious. They are being drafted. Trent lied. Look, we can't get into the weeds right now. We need Nora to sign a withdrawal of the list pendants and a statement to the APS caseworker saying it was a misunderstanding. He pulled a document out of his portfolio. It was already typed up. Nora Lawson. Hereby retract my allegations of abuse and confirm that my brother Trent Lawson has full authority to act on behalf of our mother. If I sign this, I said, looking at the paper, you get the money today. Yet, Belle said, and we can pay the nursing home. But wait, I said, pausing with the pen in my hand. I needed to push them. I needed the mechanics of the fraud. I saw the listing. It said Cindervay. Are they the buyers? They are investors, Trent said vaguely. Actually, it's a double close, Belle said, cutting him off. She was impatient. She wanted to show she was the smart one. It's standard in the industry. Nora. You wouldn't understand. Try me. I said.
Bellesidighed.
We aren't selling to Cinder Cove. We assigned the contract to Cinder Cove. They are selling it to an end buyer today. Simultaneously. That's why the timing is so tight. If the first transaction doesn't clear, the second one fails. It's an assignment of equitable interest. My heart hammered. She had just admitted it. Assignment? I repeated. So, you aren't selling the house for market value. You are selling the contract. It's faster, Belle said defensively. And the price? Miles asked gently. What is the assignment fee? That's none of your business. Trent snapped. It matters, I said, looking up. If you are selling the house for $400,000, but you assigned it to Cinder Cove for what? $200,000? Then Cinder Cove keeps the difference. Or do you get a kickback? Trent turned white. It's complicated. It sounds like you're selling Mom's house for half its value to a friend, I said. And maybe that friend is giving you a consulting fee under the table. Is that why you need cash? We are doing the best we can. Trent hissed, slamming his hand on the table. People at the nearby tables looked over. You leave for 5 years and think you can judge me. I found a way to liquidate a distressed asset fast. Yes. Cinderove takes a cut. Yet, there is a fee. But we walk away with cash today. Or we would if you didn't block it. But Mom didn't sign the assignment, I said. Mom was in the hospital. She signed the power of attorney months ago. Trent argued. The one notarized by Graham Lark. I asked. The name hit them like a physical blow. Trent's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Belle froze. How do you know that name? Trent whispered. I did some reading, I said, keeping my voice steady. I saw the date on the power of attorney. Mom was heavily medicated that week. Trent. Dear. Eris said she wouldn't have known her own name, let alone what a durable power of attorney was. She was lucid. Trent insisted. Sweat beading on his forehead. She knew what she was doing. She wanted me to handle it. Did she? I asked. Or did you guide her hand? Because that's forgery. Trent. It is not forgery if she consents, Trent yelled. He was losing control. She was there. She held the pen. But did she know what she was signing? Miles asked. Trent looked at Miles. Then at me. He realized he was shouting. He lowered his voice, leaning in close. Look, he said. Does it matter? She's old. She's forgetting things. The house is going to go to the state anyway if we don't protect the equity. I did what I had to do to save the money for the family for us. Nora, I can cut you in. $10,000 cash today. Just sign the paper. Bribery. You want to pay me $10,000 of my own money to let you steal the house? I asked. It's not stealing. Belle hissed. It's estate planning. I need to know one thing. I said the closing documents for today. The final deed transfer. Who signed it? Mom is in a hospital bed. She didn't sign anything this week. Trent looked at his phone. He typed something quickly under the table. My phone buzzed. I looked down. It was a text from Trent. Don't ask questions out loud. I used the POA to sign for her yesterday. It's done. The notary already stamped it. Just let the money wire through and I will explain everything later. I looked at the text. The power of attorney that was based on a forged signature, and he had used it to execute a deed transfer, while the grantor was incapacitated in a hospital. That was the final link. The chain of fraud was complete. I looked up at Trent. I didn't smile. I didn't look defeated anymore. You signed it yesterday, I said, stating it for the recording. Yet, Trent said. Impatient. I told you it's done. Just drop the hold. And Graham Lark notarized it again. Yet, he's our notary. What is your problem with him? My problem, I said. leaning back in my chair. Is that Graham Lark is a felon and you are a thief? The silence at the table was absolute. Excuse me, Belle said, her voice high and indignant. I know about the sedatives, I said, my voice cold and hard. I know about the fake wellness clinic where Belle buys them. I know about the double close with Cinder Cove. And I know you drained the $200,000 I sent. Trent stood up. We're leaving. You're crazy. I'm calling the police. Sit down. Trent. Miles said it wasn't a request. It was an order. Miles Keegan dropped the helpful friend persona. He placed a heavy file folder on the table. My name is Miles Keegan, he said. I am a litigator and you are not going anywhere. You set us up. Belle stammered. I facilitated a conversation. Miles said calmly. And you just admitted to conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, elder abuse, and wire fraud. We have it on tape. We have your text messages, and we have the bank records. You can't prove anything, Trent said. But his voice was shaking so hard the words barely came out. We have the video, I said. From the neighbor's doorbell. We have you and Graham Lark on the porch arguing about forging her signature. We have Belle shoving Mom back into the house. Trent's face went gray. He looked like a man who had stepped off a ledge and just realized there was no net. Nora, he pleaded, his voice cracking. Nora, please. It's not. We were in debt. The sharks were coming for us. We just needed a bridge loan. We were going to pay it back. You threw her clothes in trash bags, I said. I saw them in the garage. You weren't borrowing. You were erasing her. We can fix this, Belle said, reaching for my hand. We can cancel the sale. We can just go back to normal. There is no normal, I said, pulling my hand away. You poisoned my mother. Miles stood up. He looked at his watch. It is 10:30, Miles said. The police are currently executing a search warrant at your home on Rosemary Lane. They are also visiting the offices of Cinder Cove. Really, and Mr. Lark. He was picked up 20 minutes ago. What? Trent whispered. You didn't think we came here just to talk, did you? Miles asked. We came here to keep you busy while they secured the evidence. Miles looked at me. He gave a small, barely perceptible nod. Enough, Miles said. Now we locked the door as if on cue. 2 uniformed officers walked into the lobby. They weren't looking for a room. They scanned the area, spotted us, and started walking toward our table. Trent saw them. He slumped back in his chair, covering his face with his hands. Belle stood up, knocking her chair over. I didn't sign anything. It was him. He's the one with the power of attorney. I just live there. You bought the drugs,
Belle.
I said quietly. We have the photos. The officers arrived at the table. Trent Lawson. Belle Lawson. The first officer said, Please stand up. You are under arrest. I watched them being handcuffed. The clinking of the metal was the only sound in the lobby. People were staring. I didn't look away. I watched my brother, the boy I had tried to protect my whole life, being led away. He looked back at me, tears streaming down his face. Nora, he cried. Nora, help me. I picked up my coffee cup. It was cold. I did help you, I whispered to the empty space where he had been. I stopped you from becoming a murderer. The timeline of justice is usually a slow grinding thing measured in months and continuances. But when you have a litigator like Miles Keegan and a private investigator like Serena Knox working in tandem, the gears grind with a terrifying high-speed precision. Miles had filed the emergency motion at 8 o'clock in the morning, 2 hours before our meeting at the Hyatt. By the time the police were leading Trent and Belle out of the hotel lobby in handcuffs, The clerk of the Maricopa County Superior Court had already stamped the documents. Temporary restraining order granted. Lease pendants recorded. Those two pieces of paper were more powerful than any gun. The list pendants, a notice of pending legal action, acted like a radioactive tag on the property title. It meant that even if Trent somehow managed to trick a buyer, the sale would be void. The house was frozen. It was a dead asset. But the law allows for bail. That was the one variable we couldn't control. Because the charges were technically white-collar fraud, forgery and conspiracy, and because neither Trent nor Bell had a prior criminal record, the magistrate set their bond at $50,000 each. It was a standard procedure. They called a bondsman, paid the 10% premium, and walked out of the downtown precinct at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. They walked out thinking they could still fix it. They walked out thinking they were smarter than the system. I was waiting at Miles's office when Serena's computer chimed. They made bail. Serena said. Her eyes locked on the screen. And they are moving fast. Where are they going? Asked. Leaning over her shoulder. They took an Uber back to the house on Rosemary Lane. Serena said. But they are not going to stay there. Look at the bank alerts. She pulled up a window showing Trent's flagged accounts. Attempted wire transfer declined. ATM withdrawal limit reached $500. Credit card transaction. Southwest Airlines declined. They are trying to liquidate. Miles said from his desk where he was organizing the stack of evidence for the district attorney. They just realized the assets are frozen. The freezing order hit the banks 20 minutes ago. They're going to run. I said. They can't fly. They'll drive. Nalos is only 3 hours south. Let them try. Miles said grimly. We are just waiting for the final nail. That nail came in the form of an email at 3:45. The insider at Cinder Cove really was a junior agent named Kyle. He wasn't doing it out of the goodness of his heart. He was doing it to save his own skin. Miles had sent a draft of the lawsuit to the brokerage firm earlier that day, naming everyone involved as co-conspirators in elder abuse. Kyle cracked. He forwarded an internal email chain to Miles. The subject line was loss and deal urgency. The email from Trent to the agency dated 2 weeks ago read, We need to close before the 20th. Her lucid moments are getting shorter, and my sister might come back from Europe soon. If we wait, she might not be able to hold the pen. The reply from the senior broker at Cinder Cove read, Understood. We will expedite the double close. Just make sure the notary is on board with the condition of the seller. Bingo. Miles whispered. That proves mens rea guilty mind. They knew she was incapacitated. They knew the drugs were affecting her. And they proceeded anyway. This isn't just fraud anymore. Nora. This is predatory exploitation with intent. He picked up the phone and dialed the detective in charge of the case. Detective Miller. It's Keegan. I just sent you an email. You need to revoke that bail now. While the lawyers fought the paper war, I went to the house. I met the Adult Protective Services caseworker, a stern woman named Ms. Alvarez, and a uniformed police officer at the front door of the home on Rosemary Lane. Trent and Bell weren't there yet. They were still in transit from the station, so we had a window of time to execute the emergency inspection order. I used my key, the one I had taken from Trent's keychain during the chaos at the hotel. The house smelled stale. The air conditioning was humming, but it couldn't mask the underlying scent of neglect. Show me where she slept. Alvarez said. I led them to the master bedroom. It was luxurious with the white duvet and the expensive furniture, but that wasn't where my mother slept. No, I said, pointing to the small guest room off the laundry area. She wasn't allowed in there. Trent and Bell took the master. We walked to the small room. The door was closed. I reached for the handle. Wait, the officer said. He pointed to the top of the door frame. There was a slide bolt installed on the outside. They locked her in. I whispered. the horror washing over me fresh and cold. They locked her in at night like an animal. The officer took a photo. We opened the door. The room was sparse. A twin bed with a thin blanket. No television. No books. And in the corner, a portable commode. Why is there a toilet in here, Ms. Alvarez asked, her voice tight. The bathroom is right across the hall. Because if she was locked in, I said, my voice shaking. She couldn't get to the bathroom. Alvarez put on gloves. She opened the nightstand drawer. There were no personal items. No photos of her children. Just the orange bottle. The officer bagged it. This is unlawful imprisonment, the officer said. This upgrades everything. We heard a car engine in the driveway. They're here, I said. The officer put a hand on his holster. Stay behind me. But the car didn't stop. We heard the engine rever a desperate high-pitched whine, and then the squeal of tires peeling out. They saw the cruiser. The officer shouted into his radio. Suspects fleeing. Black BMW SUV heading east on Rosemary. The chase didn't last long. It wasn't a movie scene with helicopters and explosions. It was desperate, clumsy, and pathetic. Serena was tracking them from her office, relaying their position to the police dispatch. They are heading for the storage unit on Main Street. Serena's voice crackled over the speakerphone on my cell. They must have cash stashed there. They know their cards are dead. I was in the back of the police cruiser riding along because I refused to stay behind. Miles had argued against it. But I told him I needed to see the end. I needed to see the moment the door closed on them the way they had closed it on my mother. We pulled up to the U.S. storage facility just as Trent's BMW screeched to a halt in front of Unit 42. Trent jumped out. He was still wearing his suit from the morning, but the jacket was gone and his shirt was soaked with sweat. He fumbled with the keypad on the gate, his fingers slipping. Belle stayed in the car. She was slumped in the passenger seat, her face buried in her hands. The police cruisers boxed them in. Silent. No sirens. Just the heavy authoritative presence of the law. Trent Lawson. The officer shouted over the PA system. Step away from the gate. Put your hands on your head. Trent froze. He looked at the gate. He looked at the police cars. He looked at me sitting in the back of the lead cruiser. For a second, I thought he might run. I thought he might try to climb the fence. But Trent was not a fighter. He was a bully. And bullies crumble when the power dynamic shifts. He dropped his keys. He sank to his knees on the hot asphalt, sobbing. It wasn't me, he screamed, his voice cracking. It was her idea. She made me do it. I watched as the officers moved in. They pulled him up, spun him around, and cuffed him. This time, it wasn't a polite arrest in a hotel lobby. It was rough. It was final. They pulled Belle out of the car. She wasn't crying. She was screaming. He signed the papers, she shrieked, thrashing against the officer's grip. I didn't sign anything. I'm just the wife. He told me it was legal. Look at the signatures. It's all him. He says it was you. The officer said calmly, walking her toward the separate cruiser. You can discuss who is lying in the interview room. They were put in separate cars. The power couple, who had plotted to steal a life, were now turning on each other like rats in a bucket. I stepped out of the cruiser. The Arizona sun was setting, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and orange. The officer handed me a bag they had recovered from the trunk of the BMW. Is this your mother's? He asked. I opened it. Inside was a jewelry box. My grandmother's pearls. My father's wedding ring. And a stack of cash. Maybe $10,000 wrapped in rubber bands. They had raided the house before the police got there. They had taken the only things of sentimental value my mother had left, intending to pawn them in Mexico. I looked at Trent in the back of the cruiser. He was pressing his face against the glass, mouthing the word, "Sister." I felt a tremor run through my hand. It wasn't fear. It wasn't sadness. It was the physical release of 5 years of tension. "I am not your sister," I said, though he couldn't hear me. "I am the landlord and you are evicted." My phone rang. It was Miles. "We got the judge." Miles said bail is revoked. They are being remanded to custody pending trial. The DA is adding charges of kidnapping and conspiracy to commit fraud. They aren't getting out tonight. Nora, they aren't getting out for a long time. "And the house?" I asked. "The transaction is CanLed," Miles said. "Cinder Cove backed out. The title is safe. It's over." I hung up. I looked at the storage unit at the police lights reflecting off the metal doors. I thought about the slide bolt on the outside of the guest room door. I thought about the unlabeled pills. I thought about my mother scrubbing the floor while they drank wine. Family is supposed to be the people who catch you when you fall. But sometimes family is just the people who know exactly where to push to make you fall faster. I turned my back on the police cars. I didn't need to see them go to jail. I knew where they were going. I needed to go to the hospital. I needed to tell my mother that the monsters under the bed were gone. "Take me back," I said to the officer. "I have somewhere to be." The Maricopa County Superior Court was a place of sterile fluorescent judgment. The air conditioning was set to a temperature that felt designed to keep tempers cool. But the atmosphere inside courtroom 4B was boiling. I sat in the front row of the gallery. My hands were folded in my lap, resting on the denim of my jeans. I had not dressed up. I was not here to impress anyone. I was here to witness the end of a nightmare. Next to me sat my mother, Lillian Lawson. She looked different than she had a week ago. The gray tunic was gone, replaced by a simple blue blouse she had owned for 10 years. Her hair was clean and brushed. She was still thin, frail from months of malnutrition, but her eyes were clear. The fog of the sedatives had lifted, leaving behind a sharp, terrified awareness of what had been done to her. At the defendant's table sat my brother, Trent, and his wife, Belle. They were not wearing their designer suits today. They were wearing county orange. Their bail had been revoked after the attempted flight, and they had spent the last 4 nights in the downtown jail. Trent looked smaller. Without the shoulder pads of his jacket and the lift of his expensive shoes, he looked like a frightened child playing dress-up. Belle looked haggard, her roots showing, her face devoid of the makeup she used as armor. They did not look at us. They stared at the table, their hands cuffed to a metal bar attached to the floor. "All rise," the bailio announced. Judge Holloway entered. He was a man with a face carved from granite, known for his harsh sentences in elder abuse cases. He took his seat and looked over the rim of his glasses at the defense table. "We are here for the evidentiary hearing regarding the emergency guardianship of Lillian Lawson," the judge said, his voice booming without a microphone, "and the concurrent criminal arraignment for Mr. Trent Lawson and Mrs. Belle Lawson. Prosecution. You may proceed." The district attorney, a sharp woman named Ms. Vance, stood up. She didn't waste time with opening theatrics. She went straight for the jugular. "Your Honor," Vance began, "this case is not a complex financial dispute. It is a systematic, biological, and legal dismantling of a human being. The state intends to prove that the defendants did not just steal from Lillian Lawson. They enslaved her." She picked up a file. Exhibit A. The medical records from Banner Desert Medical Center. She walked to the projector. A chart appeared on the screen. It showed the toxicology levels in my mother's blood. This red line represents the concentration of alprazolam and zolpidem in the victim's system. Ms. Vance explained, "As you can see, the levels are consistent with heavy daily sedation. This was not therapeutic. This was chemical restraint. Dear heiress has testified that at these levels, the victim would have been pliable, confused, and unable to form long-term memories. She pointed to 3 specific spikes on the graph. These peaks are critical, Your Honor, she said. The first spike occurred on August 12th, the second on September 15th, and the third on November 2nd. She swapped the slide. Now, let us look at the legal timeline. On August 12th, the petition for guardianship was signed. On September 15th, the durable power of attorney was notarized. On November 2nd, the listing agreement with Cinder Cove really was executed. A murmur went through the courtroom. The connection was undeniable. They didn't just drug her to keep her quiet, Ms. Vance said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper. They drugged her specifically to use her hand to sign away her life. They waited until she was chemically incapacitated and then they guided her pen. Trent flinched. Belle closed her eyes. Objection, the defense attorney said, standing up half-heartedly. My clients maintained that the medication was for the victim's anxiety. They were trying to help her manage her moods. Overruled. Judge Holloway said instantly, sit down. Ms. Vance continued. Exhibit B. The testimony of the Adult Protective Services caseworker and the neighbors. She read from the report. She described the slide bolt on the outside of the guest room door. She described the commode in the corner. She described the neighbor's video of Belle physically shoving my mother into the house. And finally, Vance said the confession. She projected the text messages Trent had sent me at the Hyatt. I used the POA to sign for her yesterday. It is done. The defendant admits to using a power of attorney, which we now know was obtained through fraud, to execute a deed transfer while the victim was hospitalized. Vance said. This is not guardianship. This is grand larceny mass discare. Then Serena Knox's work came into play. Vance called a forensic accountant to the stand. He laid out the money trail with brutal clarity. We traced the $200,000 Nora Lawson sent to pay off the mortgage. The accountant testified. It was never paid to the bank. It was funneled into a private account controlled by Trent Lawson. And where did that money go? Vance asked. $60,000 went to an online gambling platform based in Malta. The accountant read from his sheet. $40,000 went to a luxury car lease dealership. $20,000 went to high-end retail stores, including Louis Vuitton and Gucci. He paused. And $5,000 was paid in cash withdrawals to a Mr. Graham Lark, a mobile notary with a revoked license in Nevada. The courtroom was silent. The puzzle was complete. They had taken my sweat, my labor, and my sacrifice, and they had turned it into poker chips and handbags. And they had paid a criminal to stamp the papers that made it legal. Judge Holloway looked at Trent. Is this true? Mr. Lawson, did you spend your mother's mortgage money on gambling? Trent tried to stand, but the cuffs held him down. Your Honor, I was going to pay it back. It was an investment strategy. I just needed time. Gambling is not an investment strategy. The judge snapped. It is a vice, and funding it with the stolen assets of a vulnerable adult is a felony. The defense attorney tried one last Hail Mary. Your Honor, these are family matters. My clients are young. They made mistakes. They were overwhelmed by the burden of caregiving. They did not intend to harm Mrs. Lawson. They were simply misguided. Misguided? Judge Holloway repeated. The word dripped with disdain. Locking a woman in a room is not misguided. Forging signatures is not misguided. Starving a mother in the home she owns while you eat takeout in the living room is not misguided. The judge leaned forward. This court finds that there is sufficient evidence to bind the defendants over for trial on all charges. Furthermore, regarding the civil matter of the property, He banged his gavel. The deed transfer to Cinder Cove really is hereby declared void. Ad initio void from the beginning. The power of attorney dated September 15th is void. The guardianship petition is dismissed with prejudice. He looked at me. Nora Lawson is hereby appointed as the temporary conservator of the estate solely for the purpose of recovering assets. Then the judge looked at my mother. She was sitting small in the wooden chair. Mrs. Lawson, the judge said, his voice softening. I know this has been a traumatic ordeal. You do not have to speak, but if you would like to say anything to the court or to your son, you may do so now. The room held its breath. I looked at Mom. She was trembling. Her hands were gripping the armrest so hard her knuckles were white. It's okay, I whispered to her. You don't have to. She looked at me. Then she looked at Trent slowly, shakily. She stood up. She didn't need the microphone. The silence in the room amplified her voice. I worked, she said. Her voice was raspy, but it did not break. I worked for 40 years. I scrubbed other people's toilets so he could have braces, so he could have a car. She pointed a shaking finger at Trent. I am not a child, she said. And I am not a guest in my own house. She took a breath, standing taller. I am not a maid, she said clearly. I am the owner. And I am a mother. And a mother protects her home, even from her own son. She sat down. Trent put his head on the table and wept. Not tears of remorse, I suspected, but tears of a man who realized his victim had finally stood up. Thank you, Mrs. Lawson, the judge said quietly. He turned to the bailiffs. Remand the defendants to custody. No bail. Set the trial date for next month. The bailiffs moved in. They hauled Trent and Belle to their feet. The sound of the chains was heavy and metallic. As they walked past us, Belle looked at me. Her eyes were wild, filled with hate. You ruined everything, she hissed. We were going to be rich. We were going to take care of her. I didn't blink. You were going to bury her, I said. And now you are the ones in the hole. The heavy oak doors at the side of the courtroom opened and they were led away. The orange jumpsuits disappeared into the holding cell. The noise in the courtroom returned. Lawyers shuffled papers. The clerk typed furiously. I didn't move. I just sat there feeling the adrenaline drain out of my body, leaving behind a profound exhaustion. Miles Keegan walked over to us. He put a hand on my shoulder. It is done, Nora, he said. The list pendants is permanent. The house is yours again. The bank has already been notified to freeze the remaining funds in Trent's account. We will get back what we can. Thank you, Miles, I said. For everything. I turned to my mother. Ready to go? She nodded. I want to go home. Not yet, I said gently. We have to go get the locks changed first. Real locksmiths this time. And I am ripping those cameras down. She smiled. It was a weak smile, but it was real. I would like that. And I want my garden back. I want to plant roses again. We will plant a whole forest if you want, I said. We walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was crowded with people dealing with their own tragedies, their own battles. But as we stepped through the metal detectors and out the front doors of the courthouse, the Arizona sun hit us. It was bright. Blindingly bright. I took my mother's arm. She leaned on me. Not because she was weak, but because she knew I was there to hold her up. We walked down the steps to the parking lot. I thought about the house on Rosemary Lane. I thought about the ghost of the girl I used to be. The one who left to weld steel in the cold ocean to save her family. I had come back to find the structure was rotten, but we had burned out the rot. The frame was still standing. I opened the car door for her. Nora, she asked as she settled into the seat. Yeah. Mom. You aren't going back to Norway, are you? I looked at her. I looked at the skyline of Mesa. I looked at the heat shimmering off the pavement. No. Mom, I said. I'm done with the cold. I'm staying right here. I closed the door. This time, it wasn't locked to keep her in. It was closed to keep her safe. I walked around to the driver's side, got in, and started the engine. We drove away from the court, away from the orange jumpsuits and the lies. We drove toward home, and for the first time in 5 years, I knew that when we got there, the key would work and the person on the other side of the door would be free. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Maya Revenge Stories. I really hope you enjoyed following Nora's journey to get justice for her mother. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please drop a comment down below with your city or country. It is always amazing to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to press the like button to help this video get recommended to more people who love a good revenge drama. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next story.